This is a cornerstone of their community. It's a part of how the community congregates and comes together and celebrates.
I see trees of green, red roses too. I see them bloom for me and for you, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world.
All right, hello and welcome. My name is Chris Muscato. I am an adjunct professor from the University of Northern Colorado, just north of Denver.
And I'm Lois Davis, and I'm a resident of Vitalia, Montrose in Ohio. And well, happy Valentine's Day, even though we are going to talk about Mardi Gras.
Happy Valentine's Day to you as well. All right, so we're going to be talking about Carnival today.
Yeah.
And now that that's taken care of, I'm going to take this off because I can't actually see anybody. So thank you very much for meeting with me today. It's very, very nice to actually get a chance to meet you. So how would you like to start? What would you like to know about Carnival?
Well, what would you like to know about Carnival? Well, my understanding, you correct me if I'm incorrect, but my understanding of Carnival is that this is the lead up time to Mardi Gras and Shrove Tuesday. And I believe it begins on 12th night or the 6th of January, which is the day that the three kings arrived at the manger in Bethlehem. And there is this time of festivities and eating and drinking and having lots of fun and leading up to Shrove Tuesday and Ash Wednesday, and then of course Lent when everything calms down. That's my understanding of Carnival.
Right, so it is a extended and very drawn out holiday is essentially what Carnival is. And it does change a little bit by region. Technically, by most areas, it does start right after Epiphany, so in early January with the 12th night, and then it lasts for that whole pre-Lenten period. In the United States, we tend to see it really as the build up to Shrove Tuesday, to Mardi Gras. In other parts of the world, the event of Carnival is as important, if not more important, than the final day of it. But here, especially in North America, the big day we tend to build up to is that very, very, very last day of it, which is Mardi Gras, which is French for Fat Tuesday, right before Ash Wednesday.
Yes. Oh, I thought it was Latin.
I mean, not far off.
Well, where I come from in Canada, it's all about ice and snow.
Makes sense.
Yes. And the festivities our dog sled races, ice carving. How about a snow bath? Would you like a snow bath? And because it's in Quebec that is, and of course there's tons of snow. So make good use of it, right, during Carnival.
Absolutely. I can imagine some parts of Carnival will be a little more difficult with that much cold weather, but yeah, everywhere is a little bit. I have never got a chance to visit Quebec during Carnival or Mardi Gras. I'd love to.
I looked up Shrove in the dictionary and could not find it. So what about Shrove Tuesday? You know, where I just thought it meant pancakes because that's what my mother did on Shrove Tuesday. We always had pancakes, but I believe, and correct me please, that it has something to do with forgiving your sins.
Yes. So today is about preparation for the Lenten period, and the fasting and the preparing of the soul and the body and preparing for Easter. Now, the word Shrove itself comes from shrive, which refers to the confessing of sins and the preparations of the soul in that way.
So that means if you celebrate too much, it all gets forgiven before you go into Lent.
Essentially, yes.
Where
And
you
that
have
is
to behave yourself.
well, and that is the purpose of Carnival. So Carnival exists because of Lent. And again, I'm a history professor, so if you're okay, we're going to dive a bit into history just because that's where everything always fits for me. So Carnival, as we know it, starts in Italy, which makes sense where the Catholic Church is based. And it actually derives from some parts of it, at least derives from some pre-Catholic traditions. We'll talk about that in a minute, but from the Romans in particular. But it was around the year 600 CE or AD that Pope Gregory I was the first pope to really sit down and say, okay, here's how we should celebrate Lent. And then here's how we should celebrate the time before Lent. So he was the first one to say that Lent will be defined by fasting. And that's how we're going to prepare ourselves and prepare our souls and commemorate with this history of Jesus wandering through the desert for 40 days. But because Lent is defined by fasting, we're going to spend the 2 months beforehand enjoying life. And we're going to spend all this build up to Lent just focusing on kind of our earthly pleasures. And we're going to have parties and we're going to eat meat and we're going to partake in all the things that we're not going to partake in Lent. Now, it's worth noting that this is not necessarily supposed to be a time of sinfulness, at least not as an original iteration. It's about joy and a little bit of excess, but not necessarily in the sense of like, okay, well, now I really screwed up. I've got to spend the next 40 days atoning for myself. It's a little different, especially in the medieval traditions. You didn't always have room in your day for a lot of pleasures and joy. And so it's giving people a period of time to really focus on just letting out some stress and having some fun, especially before a big period of fasting. That was a very, very important part of life. And that's what we go back to actually some of those pre-Catholic Roman traditions. The Romans would have a few holidays every year that were specifically set aside to let the servants and the slaves kind of blow off some steam. And there were holidays where the masters would serve the slaves or the slaves would get to throw food at the masters. And it was an effective way to stop slave rebellions and servant rebellions from happening. You give them a few days to blow off some steam, and then that carries into our Catholic traditions and Carnival. And so we have a big party for 2 months before going into the Lenten season.
But isn't this not just a Catholic celebration? This is a Christian celebration.
Yes, absolutely it is. It starts obviously with the Catholic Church prior to the Protestant Reformation. And it still has remained, especially in the Western Hemisphere, mostly celebrated in Catholic traditions. But there are a vast number of Protestant communities in the United States, in Canada, all throughout the Americas, all throughout Europe, all throughout Africa and Asia and the world that do celebrate their own traditions for Carnival. And then, of course, a little more focused generally in the Protestant churches on Ash Wednesday and Lent and Easter.
Mm-hmm. So what I have found in thinking about modern Christian holidays and celebrations is that very often one can go back into prehistory even, and certainly pre-Christian history, and find things that are the Christian tradition has been superimposed on some very ancient traditions. Mm-hmm. Something that people have been celebrating for millennia.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, part of Carnival does come from that as well. And there's a reason for that. When the Catholic Church is trying to, especially Catholicism or Christianity pre-Protestant Reformation has spread throughout Europe, the church gets to a point around 500, 600, 800 in their AD, where they're realizing that people kind of celebrate and focus their religion in different ways in different parts of Europe. And they want to consolidate that. They want to try and make sure everyone's practicing the faith the same way. And so they start to standardize the calendar and the festivals we celebrate and how we celebrate them. And especially when dealing with what is largely an illiterate population in most of Europe, one of the easiest ways for them to do that was just to say, okay, well, here's this festival that you've been celebrating forever, that your community, your village has been celebrating this for 1,000 years. You're going to keep that same festival, but now instead of being a fertility ritual or a seasonal thing, now it's associated with this saint or this moment in the liturgical calendar. So it becomes a very, very effective way to kind of teach these populations to learn the Christian calendar by using the festivals and the events that they had already been raised with and learned to practice.
Yes, but I bet not very many of them have been raised with thinking that on Ash Wednesday you ate tater ash. My mother always, I'm from Britain, and my mother always had pancakes on Shrove Tuesday. So hence I thought Shrove meant pancake.
Okay, I see it.
But on Wednesday, Ash Wednesday, we had tater ash. And my mother always said it's because it's Ash Wednesday. Well, when I grew up and lost my very working class British accent, I realized that my mother, what we were really saying in Lancashire was potato hash. But
Okay.
they dropped their H's. So tater ash had nothing to do with that.
Okay.
But isn't that interesting that families have their own little unique celebrations that kind of came out of their heads?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that is so funny. Such a funny thing to celebrate.
You're going to accidentally, as a result of this video, start a new tradition of people eating potato pancakes and having tater ash on Ash Wednesday.
Tater ash,
Spread the
right?
tradition.
Well, I would bet they still do it in Lancashire. I bet they still do it in Lancashire. I have a question.
Yes.
Do you think those masses of people that we see celebrating in New Orleans and other places around the world, Venice, and are they looking at this as a Christian celebration, or is this just something they do in the middle of winter to feel good, before the snow goes? I can't imagine that they're all Christians. What do you say?
I imagine that it varies. Like I said, Carnival and Mardi Gras and these sort of celebrations, they have different iterations throughout the world, and in different countries and different communities, you get a mixture of people who participate for different reasons. In a lot of the countries where Carnival is a substantially recognized event, those tend to be countries where Catholicism in particular is still the dominant religion. So all these people are raised with this as part of their faiths. But of course, there's also places like New Orleans, where you have a mixture. Now, when we think of Mardi Gras, we tend to think of the big tourist spectacles. And that's largely thanks to just the media representation and what we all get to see. But Mardi Gras in New Orleans is a lot more complex and nuanced and rich than just what you get on the headlines, of college tourists going down there and misbehaving. And so for some people, it is going to be a big party, and in the middle of winter, let's party it up. For some people, it is more significant, but not necessarily a religious event. Community and the ability to celebrate your community has always been a substantially important part of Carnival. In New Orleans, the crews that are put together by various social clubs and Rotary clubs and things like that, that's a very, very important part of how the community is kind of maintained. And then for a number of populations, it is still is still connected to their liturgical calendar and to their Christian faith and tradition. So it varies. And even in the same city, you can find there's one more touristy parade over here, and there's one more religious parade over here, and they'll interact with each other sometimes. But yeah.
I understand that at one point the parades or the celebrations became so rowdy and so raucous that some restrictions had to put on them. And this organizing into social groups and into crews took care of that.
Yes, that is. It was a way to kind of focus a lot of this. Like I said, and this is true still even up until modern times. One of the purposes of Carnival is just a big moment for everyone to let out their stress. Get rid of the stress of the year and just kind of blow off some steam. And if it's been a rough year or a rough couple years, that releasing of stress can be pretty turbulent. So organizing it into things like the cruise and having kind of these methods of participation, they help with that.
Yeah, I wonder, going back to Pope Gregory, I was just thinking about I think it was about 1582. It just occurred to me that was like a high, the change in Europe with Protestantism, and I wonder if that had an influence on Pope Gregory to make something that was just Catholic very special.
Right. So Pope Gregory was around 600, so he's a bit before that. But the Pope at the time, who was going through the popes who went through the Protestant Reformation and then the Counter Reformation, they did put a lot of focus on emphasis on the big celebrations of Catholicism. And in particular, those traditions were brought over to the Americas by the Catholic colonists, by the French and the Spanish and the Portuguese, as a big part of how they brought Catholicism to the Americas. And at that time, there is very much a sense of competition of who's going to colonize the Western Hemisphere. Will it be Protestantism or will it be Catholicism? And for the Catholic colonists, this is bringing those traditions over and making sure that they are celebrated and very routinely celebrated is a very, very big part of ensuring that the Americas is brought under the Catholic half of the schism in the church there.
And don't forget the conquistadors who also imposed the religion on, although they did allow them, the Americans, the South Americans and the Central Americans to incorporate their own old religious traditions in Carnival. What strikes me about thinking about the costumes, the fact that people dress up so much. Well, in fact, if you Google Carnival costume or Mardi Gras costume, you get 191,000 responses. So
That's
I
right.
assume costumes are really important. And feathers. When you think about, I've seen some of the wonderful native Aboriginal dances from South America and from Central America, and feathers were so important long before the conquistadors. And so that is something that got incorporated into the costuming, which is very effective, and they're very beautiful. So, but when you think about costumes, think about Venice, for instance, where the mask is extremely important, but very different from American masks with all the feathers. They're I believe that they change gender.
They can, yes.
They can change gender. in their costuming and their masks, and also use animal masks.
Mhm.
So the original culture makes a determination about even what the costumes are.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they wear snowsuits and drive bombardiers in Quebec.
I imagine that your costumes
Yeah.
would have to be very heat efficient. So the costuming and the mask, that goes back to Italy as well. I mentioned Carnival, as we know, it really starts in Italy, you know, where the center of the church. And so the reason we have the costumes, again, goes back to this idea of Carnival being a time of what we call reversal rituals. So it's a time of year in which people are able to challenge their status. And again, this goes back to the Roman times where you have the days where the slaves would be served by the masters.
Yes, I know about
Costuming becomes,
yeah.
yeah, exactly. Yes, I know, exactly.
Saturnalia.
Costuming becomes an important part of that. Now, in the Italian Renaissance tradition, there's an art form called commedia dell'arte, which are short plays, generally humorous or satirical in nature, and they use stock characters. So you have like the fool, the professor, the plague doctor, and each one has a specific mask.
Yeah.
So those masks from the Commedia dell'arte are brought into the Carnival traditions, which is why Venice is still seen as kind of the center of, you know, the big Carnival with the masks and everything like that is still a part of that. And each of those masks represents something specifically. And each of those masks has its own name. But that's where that tradition comes from. And then the costumes just get more and more elaborate because Carnival is a chance for people to disappear into something else. If you're a peasant in daily life back in the medieval time, well, now you can dress like an aristocrat or a lord. Or today, if you're just, you know, you're a banker or accountant, but you want to be a plague doctor or a fancy medieval mask or whatever you can. It's a time to change. Then that, of course, comes to the Americas, that tradition, and that's where we start to get the feathers and things like that. That especially takes off in the 19th century after the independence movements. A lot of the Central and South American countries, they weren't too sure how they felt about their indigenous and African heritages during the colonial period. But then after independence, that's when they get to be like, okay, who are we as a people, and where do all of our different sources of heritage come from? And we're going to celebrate the fact that we have these different traditions. And that's why you have the huge feathers and the bright colors and all the costume that draws from African and indigenous traditions, and the music as well. In particular in South America, the music is a integral and inseparable part of Carnival. Samba music.
Samba.
Absolutely, right. And yeah. So,
Love and nakedness. I mean,
yeah,
naked. You have to. I mean, the American gals in and some of the guys too in New Orleans are practically. They just have a few beads hiding critical parts of their anatomy. You have to have a perfect body for that, though.
and a lot of confidence.
And a lot of confidence. You are so right.
That also goes back to those role reversals. It's a time to do things you shouldn't normally do. It's interesting. The first account we have of that in American records is back in 1889, when a newspaper in New York publishes an article about all of the immodestly dressed women who are in New Orleans during Mardi Gras, and how it's this unbelievable, shameful thing. But it's a tradition that, yeah, it's likely roughly as old as Mardi Gras itself.
Well, I believe that's about when parades became a part of Mardi Gras, was in the 1880s, sometime around there, the first parades.
Yes, and as you mentioned, as there's probably always been some sort of, I mean, not always, but some sort of parade-like activities. It's a common thing. You get together, you show off the things, but the organized parades as we know it, the crews, like you were mentioning earlier, organizing people into social clubs and each one having various floats and parade routes, that really kicks off in the late 19th century as they're trying to organize this a bit more.
Mm-hmm. I was really interested to know that some of the celebrations in other countries have been modernized, really modernized. I was fascinated by the Germans
Mhm.
who have this terrible thing on their conscience. So they Mardi Gras tends to be inclusive of everyone and to fight xenophobia. And they really concentrate on that now. I mean, this is something fairly new since the Holocaust, but it was just an example for me of how the celebrations and how the nature of it can change with the times and
Absolutely.
become, yes. Uh-huh.
Yeah, and it's a Carnival is and or Mardi Gras or whichever part of that your country kind of focuses on. A lot of times these have become very big. Like I said, they're defined by community, and so in places like Rio de Janeiro, we see this as being a like a fundamental part of the national experience. In Louisiana or Quebec, this is a very big moment, and so it's a good chance to say, okay, who belongs in our community, and if we let you participate in our Carnival, our Mardi Gras, it's a way of making a very very big statement about this is who gets to belong, which in today's world
Uh-huh.
that has a lot of power to it.
Right. So Germany then is making the point that everyone belongs,
Hmm.
I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. By the way, the Canadian, the Quebec
Mhm.
Carnival is the biggest in the world. It's what I read
Perfect.
when I did a little bit of research. And what was the country? Bolivia
Mhm.
uh, has a parade that lasts for 20 hours.
Yeah,
I think
somebody
that's probably the biggest parade in the world.
I can't imagine that's
I mean, unimaginable, right?
yeah.
What, how the idea of Carnival is expressed in unique ways in different cultures,
Right.
and you know we have to give credit to the slave influence
Oh.
in our own celebrations, which
Mhm.
brought the color, the wonderful color, the music, the extravagance
Mhm.
of, I have never been, I don't like really large crowds. And when I was in college, I know kids would get in the car and drive down to New Orleans and take and sleep in the car. They didn't even get hotels or anything. That never appealed to me. I was never interested.
Yeah.
That would be stressful. That would not be fun for me.
I agree. That's not relieving of stress. That's more stress. I agree. I agree. Now you mentioned the different traditions throughout the world. And it's funny, up in Quebec, talk about, people being very dressed for winter. Carnival for half the world is in summer, which means that for a lot of, and this is especially popular in the Caribbean and in Central America and South America, one of the big parts of how Carnival is celebrated are these huge community water fights. And people will throw water at each other and get in these big water fights because it's a summertime event, which itself actually kind of draws from in Europe. There's a big tradition of food fights during Carnival and people throwing food at each other. Even to this day, Italy, there's parts of Italy that the whole town gets together and they throw oranges at each other. And they have and they reenact these big battles from their town's history using food.
I bet you've never heard of Black Pudding Day. People throw the 12th of February in Lancashire, where I'm from. They have contests of throwing black puddings at each other.
There we go.
It's Black Pudding Day, right? It has nothing to do with Carnival, and I don't know why it's on in February in October. Excuse me, the 12th of October, I believe
October.
it is. Pardon me.
Oh, no, please go ahead.
I have no idea, but I love the vision of everyone throwing black puddings. Have you ever had black pudding? Yum, yum.
I can't say that I have. It's not something we have a lot of in northern Colorado, oddly enough.
And, oh, no, no. I won't describe it because you'll wonder why we eat it. So it is absolutely delicious.
All right, put it on my bucket list.
Right, go to England and go to the pub and order black pudding.
Just watch out if it's October because I might get hit by it. Okay.
Oh, yes. Oh, only in Lancashire.
I'll then make sure. Okay. I think the food fight tradition is something we should bring to North America. That'd be great. We don't have enough food fighting here. Well, it's funny in New Orleans, talking about traditions from Mardi Gras that date back. The idea of the throws from New Orleans, that they throw things from the parade floats, the beads and stuff like that. One of the traditional ones back in the late 19th century was coconuts.
Oh my
So
goodness.
talk about deadly weapons. So there's a whole historical record of people who have been injured during Mardi Gras of being hit by a coconut that was being thrown from a parade float. And even today they have, I think it's more symbolic now. I think it's like a safer exchange, but there's a ranking of coconuts that are, I believe, a golden coconut that's given away to certain participants or a high-ranking participant in the festival.
I did read something about golden coconuts. I can't remember exactly what it was, but I wonder what this year is going to be like. I believe some countries have, Portugal, I believe, has canceled any festivities, any parades. What's happening in the US?
Yeah, that's been tough. So when the COVID outbreak began back in 2020, 2 years ago, that was right at the start of the Carnival season was when we started getting news about it, and no one really knew it would be. So everyone still gathered and they had their big Carnival and Mardi Gras moments, and they actually look back now at saying that this was a big part of how the disease spread so quickly, is because it appeared right before we have these major community events all throughout the world. And then how people have dealt with it since then has just been a case-by-case, year-by-year basis. I believe they've been encouraging people to social distance, and several carnivals and Mardi Gras parades have been canceled throughout the years. But again, it's tough. For a lot of people, this is a cornerstone of their community. It's a part of how their community congregates and comes together and celebrates, and just putting a pause on that's a difficult thing to do. I think for this year, the mayor of New Orleans put out a statement, if I remember, about how the spirit of Mardi Gras was not being canceled, even if some of the events were, and they're going to try and use digital technology and other means of communication to try and make sure that there's still the celebration of Mardi Gras, even if it's not in its most traditional form. But it's tough. It's a difficult line to bounce.
Mm-hmm. So how about Lent?
Yes.
The days, I believe, what is it, 47
40 days of Lent.
About 40 days of Lent. Do you believe people really give all kinds of things up and don't eat meat?
Some places do. I know I was the church I was raised in, they did the fish fries every Friday as our the break from the strict no meat policy, and you have fish as the kind of balance there and celebrate this community. And it's just, again, it's like with Carnival and everything, it's very much, I think, kind of depends on case by case and place by place, and how people adjust to that and live out their faith and their community's faith.
I did find something that I thought was really interesting, is that in Switzerland, I know we like to talk about America, but in Switzerland, it's called Fastnacht, and I don't know. I don't know exactly what they do different, but I know that UNESCO has given this Fashnacht the title of Masterpiece of Oral and Tangible Heritage of Humanity.
Okay.
Yes, I thought that was so important. And isn't that really what it is? It is this mass of different oral and cultures, and that just made sense to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
That makes
Yeah,
sense.
and again, it shows how important these celebrations can be to the communities that participate in that. And I think there's a number of Carnival and Mardi Gras related traditions that have been recognized by UNESCO as intangible heritage. And it shows how deeply significant these are. It's a lot more than just a tourist event for these people, for a lot of these communities. It's a essential part of how they represent who they are and how they celebrate who they are.
And as fun as it is for lots and lots of people, it's something deeper and richer than just having fun. And of course, during Lent, aren't you supposed to think about Jesus Christ?
Yes, that's
Isn't
as
that
you
one of the
fast.
things? Yes, what you're supposed to do is to be thinking about Jesus Christ. If you're a Christian, of course.
Sure.
It's not obligatory if you're not.
Very true.
Well, it was very nice meeting you.
You as well.
And-
Now, if you would like a chance to show off your mask, I have a prop I want to grab really quick as well. If you give me just 1 second.
Here's my mask. It's purple. It's bigger than the screen.
Let's see if we can get my prop on screen.
Oh,
There we go. Hey, little miss. Hey, little guy.
oh, how sweet.
We're gonna try and see if they'll wear some mask for us or not here.
Yeah, very,
Guys, hold your masks up.
very sweet.
And today is their birthday, so I want to say hi to everybody.
Their birthday, well, happy birthday.
There we go. All right, thanks, guys.
What a wonderful day to have a birthday, Valentine's Day.
Oh, you want to sit up here? Okay. Oh, well, now that is a gorgeous mask, Lois. Where did you get that one from?
Oh, you can pick anything up. I told you there were 191,000 responses if you put Mardi Gras mask. Yeah. Oh, look there. I'm sitting back.
There you go. Get the height of it there. Yeah.
You can see it. Thank you. It was lovely meeting your twins.
Thank you. They were excited. We practiced.
Yeah, I was excited too.
Well, thank you so much. It was so nice to meet you, Lois. I had a great
Nice
time.
meeting you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
And I think to myself, what a wonderful